There are a lot of rumors about Grace Kelly and JFK. Did they or did they not have an affair? Did they know each other prior to the 50s? Some people say that they knew each other really well because their dads were connected. So let's break it down. Both JFK and Grace Kelly had very influential, very successful fathers. Grace Kelly's dad was John Kelly, also known as Jack Kelly, not to confuse you too much. And he had been a successful multimillionaire from his bricklaying business in Philadelphia. Joe Kennedy was a very successful businessman and in politics because of his investments in real estate, his financial support in Hollywood, and the fact that he distributed Scotch whiskey in America, probably during Prohibition. So there were many things that they had in common, and they were raised around the same place and all that. Nobody knows for sure, but Jack was known to have said when he saw the wedding of Grace Kelly, I could have married that woman because the fathers knew each other. And there are rumors that they had actually secretly known each other and had dated prior. It's very important to know that Jack Kelly had his own brush with fame because he was a famous rower. And one funny story regarding Jack Kelly and the royal family was that when he was a rower, and remember he was a bricklayer, and he went to the Henley Club in the UK because he wanted to compete in this one competition, the club would not allow him in because they had rules against rowers who had been involved in manual labor, like bricklaying. He was not allowed into that race, and then eventually, even though he didn't want to go to the Olympics, he was like, you know what, I'm going to go to the Olympics because now I wasn't allowed to go to that other thing. I'm going to go to the Olympics. So he heads to the Olympics and he wins these medals, and he also won some medals, by the way, a few years later in Paris. When he won the medal, he ended up sending his racing cap to King George V with a note that said, victory from a bricklayer, trying to rub his nose in the fact that, hey, you should allow people of all different walks of life to be able to compete in your rowing clubs. Joseph Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's dad, was also very well known and very wealthy. He did finance many Hollywood studios. He also had like a huge mall and shopping center that he had, so he just made a lot of money. But he had political aspirations for his sons. All of his sons, he wanted all of them to be in politics, and he had strict rules and goals for John especially, and one would be marrying the right person. But he also was known for being a man who had affairs. Infidelity did run in the Kennedy family. Joe Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's dad, had several affairs, including this affair with Gloria Swanson, which everyone in Hollywood knew about. But what may have made an impression on John that he could have affairs was seeing his dad firsthand having an affair with Gloria Swanson. It was 1929, and Gloria and Joe Kennedy were out on the yacht having a tryst, not knowing that 12-year-old John Kennedy was there seeing the whole thing. In his embarrassment, John jumped off the boat and tried to swim to shore. Joe caught wind of it and was like, son, you can't swim to shore, get back in the boat, I don't want you to drown. And yet that was totally an initiation into seeing how men will have affairs on their wives. John was only 12 years old, but we do know that there are rumors of him having many affairs. Joe Kennedy also had an affair in the 1940s with his secretary, Janet DeRozier, and she was just 24 and he was 60. And they had an affair for 9 years. And he said to her, Janet, I want to marry you one day. I will divorce Rose. Janet was like, no, I don't think so. I'm really interested in marrying a younger and more vibrant man. Rose knew about these affairs. The affair that Joe Kennedy had with his secretary, where she would massage his head and his shoulders right in front of Rose like there was no problem. Rose said, men always fall in love with their secretaries like it was nothing. According to Janet and her book, she said that Rose would spend thousands of dollars on a dress but be really meticulous with the help. She didn't paint a great picture of Rose, but she did think that Rose just overlooked the affairs. So now back to Grace and JFK. Did they or didn't they? Fathers were very influential, and it is said through the rumor mill that Joe Kennedy was like, you can't marry a girl like that. Why? Because she's too Hollywood. So it ended up that Grace Kelly married Prince Rainier of Monaco, but Jack Kelly was a little upset. Why? Because he had to pay a dowry of over $1 million. It's possible that Grace Kelly herself was the one who paid for the dowry because she had her own money. Okay, so back to Jack and Grace. What we do know is that Jackie knew Grace from these New York City fashion shows that they would go to because they were very into fashion. Jackie Kennedy's sister, Lee Radziwill, yes, she was a fashion icon. That's why she was at a fashion show with Grace Kelly, but she was known as the unofficial stylist of the White House. And she also was very famous. She hung around the Rolling Stones. Very good friends with Hollywood elite like Truman Capote, who convinced her to try her hand at acting. That didn't really go very well. She also was married to royalty. She was married to Count Stanislaw Radziwill, who was a Polish count. He ended up just wanted to be a British citizen because, you know, the war. She also had a relationship with Aristotle Onassis before Jackie married. John F. Kennedy was in the hospital a lot because of his Addison's disease and his back surgery, and she was hanging out with Lee Radziwill. They wanted to make a joke on Jack and have Grace dress up as the night nurse and go in and surprise him. So she goes in. She said she was very reluctant. She didn't really want to do it, but she's basically pushed into the hospital room. Like, he starts laughing because he knew immediately it was Grace Kelly. She stayed in there for a while. Wink, wink. And then later he became the president, and she always had great respect for him. They did have a dinner together, and he goes, "Oh, are you wearing Givenchy?" And she's like, "Oh, how very clever of you, Mr. President. How did you know?" And he's like, "Well, you know, fashion's becoming more popular than politics, and I have to be up on that because I was just shopping for my wife." So there you go. And then when he died, she apparently was devastated because Grace Kelly said that the one thing she loved, the fact that JFK, he represented youth. So Grace said that her husband, the prince, and many European leaders saw America as such a young nation, and it was such a shame that oftentimes they had these old, very old and decrepit old leaders and presidents. And so JFK was so refreshing because he was young and he represented the people. And so she said the one thing she remembers the most about him is his youth and how important that was during that time. But we may never know whether or not they did know each other and have an affair prior to him being the president or during, which are rumors, because Grace was known to have a very active libido, as was Jack. Just saying that those are known facts. So what do you think? Is this just hearsay? Either way, I think it's interesting that their fathers were very similar. May they rest in peace, because they were really great, dynamic people that will always be iconic because of their impact in both Hollywood and in politics.